the leaders in their last prayer for the year. Almighty God, we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to look after your creation, especially this region we call Barcaldine Regional Council. We are also conscious that our decisions are going to affect deeply the lives, land and property of the people we have come here to serve. Remind us to exercise respect for each of our fellow councillors, staff and for the people of our region. Help us in this meeting to act wisely, justly and intelligently in all our deliberations. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of both leading and serving, and assist us to do these well. Amen. Amen. Councillors, I have condolences from the late Mr. Jim Witter, resident of Barcaldine, the late Mrs. Nancy Dollinger, formerly Baramac.
Also the late Mr. Anthony Stedman of Alpha.
Mr. Anthony Stedman. STEEDMAN.
Jim Witter's name is Colin, so should we put Colin in there or leave it as Jim?
Well, we can put it in as both.
Was it Colin?
It was Colin Jones, but the family asked that his name be referred to as Jim because that's what it's known as.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Councillors, are you aware of any other unfortunate condolences? We'll observe a moment's silence, please. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make a quick statement, please? At Nancy's funeral yesterday, during the eulogy, there was a thanks from the family to one of our employees, Nicole Alton, for the care that she'd given Nancy over a fair bit of time. So I just wanted to pass that on to all councillors. Nicole was recognised for the job she'd done caring for Nancy.
Being no formal apologies of councillors, however, District Manager Coulton is on leave, so the record could reflect that, please. However, is appropriate. Take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Barcaldine Regional Council area and their elders, past, present and emerging. Declarations of prescribed COIs.
Mayor, I believe that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in the matter of 3.4.4, progress report, and 3.6.1, the works report, goal 3, as defined in the section 150 PI of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is that I'm a creator of the Lake Gun Sculpture Trail, which is mentioned in those reports, and in accordance with section 10 of the Local Government Act 2009, I will leave the meeting and stay away from the meeting while
Councillors, just clarifying there, Councillor Rogers, the prescribed conflict of interest is 3.4.4 and 3.6.1 Goal 3, and you intend to leave the room. Councillor Plum.
I believe I have no, I don't have, sorry. I have a declarable.
Mr Mayor, I believe I have a prescribed conflict of interest in 3.4.9, the procurement policy, and 3.6.2, approval of a flood damage package, because of my employer, Michael Walker Transport. I will be leaving the room.
So just confirming that, Councillor Arthur, that is 349 and 362.
I don't believe so, Mr.
Councillor Gleeson.
I don't believe so, Mr. Mayor.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to declare a prescribed conflict in 3.4.4, which is the project update because of the footpath in Porter Street, which is where my home is. So I'll declare a prescribed conflict and leave the room there, and also 3.4.9, which is the procurement policy. I will also be leaving the room for 3.4.9.
Councillor Peoples, that is 344 and 349.
That's right.
Councillors, I now need to call, does any councillor present wish to express that another councillor may have a prescribed conflict of interest? I will lead. Councillor Plum, do you believe yourself to have a prescribed conflict of interest in 349 due to your employer being a supplier of services, goods to council?
I don't do a lot. I do some. So I believe
Sorry, Councillor Plum, I can't quite hear you.
I believe I should be.
I didn't hear that, sorry.
No, I can't, still can't hear you, sorry, Councillor.
I believe that I have one.
You do?
Services.
Are you declaring?
Yes.
Councillor Plum is declaring a prescribed conflict of interest in 349. Councillor Hanson asks the same question. Don't want to, but I have to. Do you consider present the procurement
I
of
don't believe
services?
so. This is my wife, actually, Alexia, who does not tenders in Street Council. Any tenders that she doesn't want come through the main office. We don't say. So I don't believe I have, but if anyone else believes I have, I will take on board what they say, and if they believe we should take the room, I'll do it.
The procurement policy covers more than contracted or tendered items. It's anything up to $5 or as low as 99 cents.
Every single thing
Everything
you
we
are.
procure.
I will take those into
Councillor Hanson is declaring a prescribed conflict of interest in item 349. Just lost me a quorum.
That's
I don't have any others that I think councillors may need to consider. Does any other councillor present wish to ask a question of another councillor relating to a prescribed conflict of interest?
Mr Mayor, through you, I was going to ask this later on. I wasn't sure, but before I did any discussion on it, I was going to ask what you thought, but I'll ask now. When you go to the, I'm just trying to find what resolution it is. Bear with me. It is the resolution with regards to Rapid and the water mains project, Mr Mayor. It's when I look at it, I think that it's not. I possibly don't have a prescribed conflict of interest, but I'm going to ask the question about it again today, or I was going to, depending on what we decide here. It still reads to me like we're giving a contract away to do all of our water mains replacement for the 7 shires that are involved in Rapid. And that's how I'm reading it, and I was going to get clarification from myself and Rick again today. Now, to ask that question, there's probably occasion where I might supply a bit of pipe or something to council, so I probably can't ask it. But I was going to seek clarification from you guys now, whether I leave the room or whether I can stay. It is item 3.3.5, which is, the Barcaldine Regional Council approves the tender report and awards the annual water matriculation upgrade program term contract, Part A procurement and Part B NC construction to G&M Group. My concern is awarding the construction to some other group. Does that take away from our local plumbers? And I asked this yesterday, and the more I read it, the more I think it does.
Chief Engineer, is Barcaldine Regional Council a subscriber to that tender process? Have we indicated involvement with that?
The current tender, Mr Mayor, no. We have the opportunity to either go with that tender in future or not, as it's a standing offer arrangement.
And the decision to do that would be a decision of council?
Yes.
The Council of Peoples, I would answer to you that I don't believe you have a prescribed conflict of interest, because we aren't awarding that tender for construction, supply or design for a community in the Barcaldine Regional Council area. We're simply processing the finding. It's a procedural resolution to allow for the issuing of invoices to those local governments that are partaking in the joint procurement exercise, namely Barcoo and Wynyard.
Mr Mayor, the tender process has completed, so it was an open tender. I don't know who else the other tender is.
There's 5.
That's why I asked Jason.
And so we've asked Jason Briggs, in charge of this, to attend when it comes to this item. He'll come over and explain it.
But it's the first time we've had to process one of these on behalf of the group.
Okay,
So
well,
there's-
if you're happy that I don't have any sort of conflict,
For 2 reasons. One, you're not a tenderer, I know that.
Yep.
And B, it's not for works in our council area.
okay. And that's the only other thing that I wanted to query later on, Mr Mayor, is that it's a 2-year contract to supply and install for each participating council, RAP, which we are one of. Now, we're giving this company a 2-year contract.
It's already been given. The Rapid Water Group, all we're doing here is procedurally allowing the money to be transacted, because we are the banker for the Water and Sewage Group.
Okay, so,
Rapid Group approved this tender when we met it.
yeah,
Brisbane on the 28th.
we're a member of the Rapid Group too, and if we don't agree with something they're doing, we can surely have a say on that. But you're saying that you're going to give us insurance that that's not going to affect any of our local plumbers.
Not without the decision of this council.
Right.
To partake this offer would be a resolution of this council if we were to undertake water main replacement and we wish to use this tenderer as opposed to going through our own procurement process. We'd still take a resolution of this council to do so.
So this agreement with this company doesn't hold us
To an exclusive arrangement.
to an exclusive arrangement for them to do our works.
It's effectively putting them on our pre-qualified supply list. Yes, that'd be a good way of summarising.
More interpretation.
It's a joint procurement between local governments. But the decision to participate in it still rests with each local government.
Okay.
There's not in any way, no one in this room has a prescribed conflict of interest at all.
Alright. That was the only other
Would be
one.
my advice, I can't. Just on the basis of what I know, having been one of the delegates that approved this 2 weeks ago, when we went through the tender assessment, there was no need for concern. No local tenderers. I think I'm at declarable conflict of interest, is that right, Hayley? Councillor Williams. Councillor Plum.
Mr Mayor, I believe I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 3.3.2. being on the executive committee of the Barcaldine Show.
So that's with respect to the public holidays. Given it's an information report, I'm quite happy to move that Councillor Plum stays in the room for the discussion of that report. Seconded Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Carried. Councillor Arthur.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hanson. Councillor Gleeson.
Mr Mayor, I believe that I have a declarable conflict, 3.1.2.
A declarable or a prescribed?
Declarable.
Sorry,
Declarable. The DM's, the 3.9.2, the DM's report, it's in relation to the naming of the building over at the showgrounds. The letter was received by the Barcaldine Cancraft Association, which I am the president. But as myself and any of my family, definitely not going to have any financial gain, I would request from the mayor or the councillors to allow me to stay in the room.
Councillors, Councillor Peoples.
I'd like to move that Councillor Gleeson stays in the room.
Seconder. Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Carried.
Participate and vote.
Councillor Peoples is moving that Councillor Gleeson has permission to remain in the room, participate in the debate of item 3.9.2 and vote thereon in the matter. That resolution is carried by, seconded by Councillor Rogers and carried 6-0. Councillor Peoples.
No, I don't think I have this.
Councillors, does any other councillor present believe that any other councillor present has a declarable conflict of interest that may not have yet been declared? Right. We can drop this off yet. We intend to give some benefits, no declarations there, councillors. Confirmation of minutes. Might somebody move that those minutes be received from the 18 November meeting? Councillor Rogers, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Any comments on those minutes? Alterations or omissions? Might somebody move that they be confirmed, please? Councillor Rogers, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. The councillors present have a petition to present. Oh, we're out of petition season. No confidential reports. I move that my report be received, seconded by Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried. Questions, councillor? No questions? Just, it'll appear in the next agenda that there's correspondence sent this week, Monday, to Minister Butcher and his department with respect to issues around and lobbying around the renewable energy hub. Just the only addition to that correspondence that will appear in the next agenda anyway. All right.
Mr Mayor,
Yes.
the CAT meetings, has there been any new information, like is there any new threats that they're thinking that we need to look out for? Have they said anything about vaccinations and whether they know where that's
Not that you haven't seen through the media.
Yeah.
We asked them.
Nothing specific.
Brett has with my full support, made a decision to sort of wind those meetings back now to possibly only one more to discuss impacts
One in
on.
the new year to decide how we proceed.
The last round of restriction easing made things considerably easier. I note in the media this morning the foreshadowing of the vaccination rollout, which will see vaccines being received by people in age cohorts, starting with the elderly, working their way down. Unconfirmed reports, but the media is reporting that we won't get down to people in their 20s in 2021. So obviously it's a slow and methodical process that they intend to follow in that respect. But full details of that are not going to be released until the end of January. That's probably a speculative media report on multiple channels, mind you. Those CAP meetings have, though, been a useful tool in allowing staff and the community groups to be better informed and fully digest the complexity of each update, because the media reporting of it need not always reflect what the public health update was, and those meetings used to drill right down into what the public health update was rather than what the summarised version of it would be by the media, so they've been very practically useful. At times somewhat repetitive, but other times needed to happen. Okay, 3, 2, 2. Haley, can we copy the recommendations from the body of the report up, please? And amend recommendation 1. Have you got them in there?
No.
How do we do this? For these recommendations, there's 7 of them. The Mayor be authorised to negotiate and finalise the appointment of the panel's preferred applicant, Hannah Scott, to the position of Council's Chief Executive Officer. The appointment being, have you got an agenda there to read from? Were you listening to that? Yeah. But the appointment be in accordance with the 4-year performance-based contract of employment that was endorsed by the recruitment and selection panel. Recommendation 3, that the appointment be subject to a 6-month probation period with a formal 3-month review. Council formally endorse the Chief Executive Officer Performance Management System provided by Blackadder Associates as the basis of setting, monitoring and reviewing the CEO's performance. Recommendation 5, the Council appoint a performance review panel with responsibility for overseeing the implementation of the CEO PMS process in accordance with the guidelines and making recommendations to Council if necessary to amend the PMS, as well as undertaking periodic and annual reviews of the CEO and setting the CEO performance agreement for the following year. Recommendation 6, that the Mayor and all councillors form the performance review panel underneath the PMS. Recommendation 7, that the Mayor be authorised to appoint an appropriately qualified independent and external facilitator to assist the performance review panel with the CEO performance reviews. Your agendas, councillors, everybody's got those recommendations that I've just read into the record. Can I have mover? Get those recommendations be adopted. Councillor Arthur, seconded. Councillor Plum. Discussion. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Opposed? Carried 7-0. Councillors, I will be advising all staff via written correspondence either later today or earlier tomorrow of that. Expected start date is for Anna is the 8th of February. Three, three, one. Haley, would you like us to wait?
No, you can keep that.
Can somebody move the investigation report, please? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Harry, Reverend, you need to lead us through prior to questions.
Drought Communities program, request an extension to the 30th of June. A couple of projects that aren't completed by the 31st of December. I believe that will be granted as part of the agreement anyway, that it could be an option to extend.
And that wasn't the emergency money that they rushed out and told us you must spend it, it was the existing program. Questions? Councillor Blaser.
Mr Mayor, Community Care Services ordered a completed report to be issued on the 18th of December.
Friday.
Sorry. Friday. Yeah, 18th is 2 days time, Friday. It's just a bit of a shame. I thought it was a bit of a shame that it couldn't have been here today. You know, we could discuss it or whatever. But then that was my only query.
They only completed that review last week. They only completed their interviews.
Friday was the last interview, I think.
Well, and I think they did one on Saturday.
So they're going to turn a report around within 6 days of completing their interviews. That's pretty quick.
And the report, a lot of the report will be operational, involving staff information, so.
The more, I think the most that might be presented is if there was any action required that required change, or councillors might get a briefing on what change may result as a result of the findings of that report rather than the substance of it dealing with, you know.
Line names,
It'll be an operational report that will then generate change perhaps or indicate where areas may need remedy. Councillors, the QUT I alluded to in a memo to you after our visit to Brisbane, formally met since then, seems like a long time ago, but that process we were both more than suitably impressed. It was the QUT were extremely welcoming and they're very genuine and sincere in that they wish to really make big inroads with that agreement, so I can only commend them for that. Three, two. Somebody move that we receive the information correspondence. Councillor Rogers, seconded. Councillor Rogers, those in favour? Carried 7-0. Blacked out version here, so just let me get one. Questions? Comments? Brett, the Jericho Town Common, that's a situation that obviously requires a bit of tweaking.
this is to allow them to hold the cattle longer.
Well,
Or maybe
I guess the situation I'm probably referring to their request, but more generally, the fact that there's 3-year-old clean-skinned bulls running around on the common is probably something that needs addressing before an individual gets severely hurt going for a walk.
Mr. Mayor, I can give you an update. They have been sent all the guidelines as well, and we've got it underway with the contacting in regards to a muster and everything else.
I mean, those 3-year-old clean-skins don't belong to anybody, they belong to Brown. You own a beast over a certain weight in Queensland that's not identified, it's not your property, whether it's on your place or not. And, you know, that situation is untenable, that needs addressing. The appropriate use of our commons is set in our guidelines, and it certainly would appear in Jericho's case that appropriate use doesn't match.
And to answer that there too, Mr. Mayor, present guidelines say that you can't keep anything male over 6 months, Brett, is that right, or 12 months? 12 months? Okay. And I think that was put in place so as you don't end up with people putting 20 steers on the common, you know, so they're just breeding a few to sell some weaners and make a bit out of weaners. I think as it stands, it's probably the way to leave it.
Councillors, for the benefit of 3 new councillors in the room, we received approximately 2 years ago, Brett, Amy, about the time you come on board as district manager, we received requests from the common users in Jericho to allow them to keep their stock on hand and hand feed them in our facilities because they ran out of feed in the drought. And here's a request to keep cattle longer. It doesn't line up with good grazing management when you have had a very recent history of running out of feed to then ask for cattle to be held over. So, I mean, ordinarily, some of this correspondence we could look at it and say, let's come back to the review. I'm quite comfortable with their existing policy if it was being followed. It is sufficient for current use. I don't see a need to review it. So, Councillor Gleeson.
Mr. Mayor, this correspondence, can we discuss and debate
and we're not debating it because we're not resolving anything. We can discuss it, but if we need to see action from it, or if we wish to, then we'd need to bring a resolution to January or a future meeting.
Well, tabling this at the meeting, council's indicated that the policy is not going to change, so we will advise them now that policy won't change and I need to remove those cattle.
So, you know, asking to keep cattle till 2-year-old, it means they've got 600 kilo steers running around. It's absolutely
I'm 100% against it. So I'm just asking how, what's the procedure? We take note, the council takes note, and
Councillor, we're not making a decision, but I think it's clear from the indication that the CEO is receiving that we aren't intending to change, and so advice can be made back to the correspondence that there will be no change, and the district manager's indicated that the concerns I have around feral cattle occupying the common are underway to being addressed as well. It's fast. Further comment on any of the other correspondence? I know in piece of item 12, the correspondence around the tackling tough times, and also the item around support for shows. Two tackling tough times recipients, trust my memory here is St Joseph's, for the value of around $30,000, St Joseph's Primary School here in Buckhorn and the Alpha Tourism Association. I provided support letters for one of those two, definitely. It's great to see in St Joseph's case that's going to be a substantial provision of electronic equipment which will upgrade what they have, and in the case of the Alpha Tourism Society's grant, that's going to increase the interactivity and the presence of their museum, of the museum. So they're great. It's really fantastic that community groups have been able to get out there and get that sort of level of funding without anything other than just a support letter from council. And in one case, I don't think I even provided that. Damien, you may have, did you? You did. So, yeah, you know, just sometimes just being able to support them. And I know we provided some advice to St Joseph's, very comprehensive submission went in there. So that's a substantial investment, and for our show societies who do have static overhead costs, Council Plum, to receive some funding to help them bear that. As you know, whilst we were unfortunately neither of our ag shows were in receipt of the substantial grant funding that was allocated for infrastructure upgrades a few months ago, to receive some operational support won't go astray.
And unfortunately, because of COVID, the societies didn't have much expenses to pay for that funding. And here, it's
There's, I tell you what's new, there was a third one, yeah. So almost $30,000 for the SES in Jericho. David, details on that?
Mr Mayor, that was done by Patrick Downing from SES Controller in Longreach, and that's actually a QFES grant, so that'll be the actual fit out of that new building that's been council built in Jericho.
Brett, I think we should probably just write a very short letter to those three groups congratulating them on the funding. And a letter, Councillor Pickles, and a letter to the local member thanking the federal government for the support for the groups within our region. I mean, the SES is actually us, effectively, so yeah, I mean, it's not us, it is. We can just write to those four. Sorry, Councillor.
Just a couple there, Mr Mayor, any resolutions for the ALGA conference?
I don't have any, no.
No, I don't have any at this stage. And the other one was the Sunshot Energy discussion to off-take water. Is that going to be discussed later, isn't it?
Well, we received it on Friday. We debated whether we even put it in because we were that close to receiving the agenda that we might have held it till next month. And they requested a meeting in that letter, if you read. That meeting needs to occur so that we can brief them on the fact that we actually have use
for ourselves, yeah.
For that water. So there's probably a lack of complete understanding around that, and we probably need that meeting to occur before we have any discussion broadly about it. Because I think once the proponents of that are made aware of it, that could substantially change what they're requesting. So I was probably, we can discuss it at any stage. You can discuss it now, which is obviously not going to resolve anything.
No, I just was wondering what your thoughts were on it, because we discussed previously our own uses for that water, that's all.
Yeah, no, so my thoughts are we're not changing any of our plans for it. We've dedicated strategies in place to find demand side savings of town water and comply with environmental conditions. So we're pulling the water out of the environment discharge and then using that water to supplement reticulated supplies so that we aren't then substantially in breach of the cap once we are required in years to come to keep the rec park full from within our town allocation.
Yep.
So if we were to facilitate a request to use all of that sewage treatment plant water elsewhere, we'd be back into the situation of not having the water within our existing cap.
I'd leave it, personally, Mr Mayor, I feel I'd leave it open for you to, discuss this, and it just depends on what the offer might be, how much they want to pay for the water.
I'm not shutting the door on anything.
No, don't, yeah.
But they need to know that we have plans, and if they have commercial interests that see that, and we can always try and go back to the drawing board elsewhere. But for now, we've got a fairly determined course of action that's been affirmed by council, how we're going to move all of the water allocations that we've received around for the next 2 or 3 years.
And the other side of that is, what they want to pay, and also the,
Council, the only thing I'd say to interrupt your train of thought there, but we've made substantial decisions around, or we've made decisions around substantial investment in the infrastructure. Obviously, we haven't approved tenders yet because they haven't been called in some cases, but if we were to choose to then not use that, for example, like the holding facilities and so forth, in the showgrounds complex, if that was then not to be used because we sold the water, it leaves us with stranded assets.
yeah, no, I understand that. The only other side that I'm looking at is the employment opportunities that may come with that too, but I'll leave all that with you.
I think at this stage it's premature to go one way or the other. We just need them to understand that we've got a plan for a part, if not all, of that water,
Yeah.
and then see what they've asked for a meeting. I think the very least we can do is honour the meeting.
Yep.
The other point, I've asked for a briefing, and time is just not on top of us to provide this, and it's not essentially time critical, but the item 14, the correspondence relating to Tujunga people number 3, there's a substantial number of concurrent claims from native title groups, Brett, over us at the moment, and there's a bit of complexity around that I don't understand. So I've just asked a few weeks ago, which is not enough time for it, and because it's an evolving situation in whether the claim's actually accepted by the federal court or not. So I've just asked for, in the new year, if we can get a briefing to explain to council. There need not be a decision, but just so that we can have a broader comprehension of what those claims may mean around.
Before we get to Who's the expert?
Okay, any more correspondence questions? Rick? It's open by session, tables if you need. 333. Economic Development Report. Might somebody move that we receive the report? Councillor Rogers, seconded Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried. Questions? There being no questions, 334. Sorry.
Can we do that list of projects, is that, because we've got to do a business plan or something out there on that bike track? Can we add that to the, and the other thing that I'd say there, sorry mate?
RTM bike track.
Yeah. Is that we probably need to have a look at some sort of projects in our small communities there too, because there's not much going on there in the small community, so we need to have a good look at that down the track. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
334. Just to hold moving and seconding. Councillors, the reason for the move here seems precipitous given that we only adopted these dates at the last meeting, but anyway, it is what it is. LGAQ has moved the date of the LGAQ conference in October from where it's been for the last 120 years of LGAQ. They've moved it now, so good on, but that means that our dates clashed when we originally scheduled. Councillors, we also discussed in that meeting the possibility of another day in the week being better than a Wednesday, or worth considering. So the CEO and I have considered that let's try them for the last 3 meetings of the year a Tuesday to give it some experiment. The other thing is every other local government in, I think, Queensland had their final meeting of the year last week, which frees up this last 2 weeks for officers to tidy up their last minute jobs. Take extended leave if that is their wish a bit earlier than, effectively they're still working right up until the back end of next week, which is Christmas Eve. So if we've finished our business a little earlier, which then necessitated November's meeting moving forward a little bit, but because of the October meeting has also shuffled forward, there's sufficient time there, I believe, for those meetings to occur within the parameters of what the CEO is suggesting. So unless there's any negative comment, I'll go to the vote. Councillor Peoples moves, seconded Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. I think then we'll know by the time we set the meeting dates for 22 what we think of the Tuesday trial. It may not be the date, it might be another day, but it may work, and then we might alternate Wednesday, Tuesday for a bit. Right, timing is impeccable. Jason, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
To item 335, and probably can hand straight over to you for an explanation, given this is the first time we've resolved anything around our role or with respect to our Buck Alden's role now as the banker for Rapid Water and Sewerage Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I don't know.
Sorry, I should introduce Jason. So GBA provide the secretariat, and your official role within that group is
Regional Coordinator.
the regional coordinator. So Jason pulls everything together that is needed and provides advice to the strategic group. After the technical group is met, the technical group is either the chief engineer or the chief water officer from the 7 councils that make up Rapid, and the strategic group is the 7 mayors. So that's how that fits, and that's Jason's role within that. Oh, Jason, yes, this is being recorded, and cameras and all of that. You're not live though. Right, sorry for interrupting. The floor's yours.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as Councillor Dillon said, our role is the regional coordinator. There's the Outback Regional Roads and Transport Group and the Rapid Water and Sewerage Alliance. So I'm the regional coordinator for both. And as part of that, we manage, say in the roads group, we manage where TIDS projects are at. We do risk, there's a risk register that we use for that. And we basically help to progress projects through. In both of the groups, there's something that's called joint procurement resource sharing, which is where this contract comes under, but I'll get to that. One of the roles for the council that becomes the banker is that someone has to, there's our fees, plus there's also, when there's a contract that's formulated, we provide the role of superintendent for that contract as well. So basically as the banker, the council pays that, and then I do a fairly large spreadsheet up which details where every cost has to go, and I provide that cost in its complete detail. I was providing that to Barcoo, and my intent going forward would be to have a contact in Barkey Regional Council somewhere, but I would provide that spreadsheet to them and walk them through saying, you know, this is where you should bill each council. So I do all that work for the banker, and then it's really up to the banker to essentially pay the invoices from either GBA or the contractors, and then recoup those funds from the councils as per the proportions that have already been previously agreed. So we also, if you get back to joint procurement resource sharing, particularly in the Rapid Water and Sewerage Alliance, there are a number of projects going at the moment. This one is a little bit, is one of them, but we've also done STP regulatory requirements. We're doing the infrastructure cliff. There's the SCADA and telemetry one with the ARCS group. We're doing that one as well. I think there's a number of them, and I'm more than happy to perhaps through yourself, Mr. Mayor, provide that report, the regional coordinator's report to council. That might help explain it a bit.
The scaring's one that we'd all be familiar with.
Yeah, the air scaring one, that's
Air
another
scaring.
one that was, and essentially the contractor submits the claims, we assess the claim, and then we go, yeah, that's okay to pay. We then facilitate the contractor getting paid, and then in the case that one went through Barcoo, I then sit down and say, okay, this on a proportional basis, this is where Barcoo, you need to send an invoice to these councils to get those funds back in. Essentially, that's it. That's the role of the banker. So previously, Barcoo's done it, as I said, but also Longreach has done it in the past as well. So, and I think Barcoo nominated this time around to do it. So that's In particular, this rapid water sewage water mains replacement project, we called a tender because there are issues with the water mains. I don't think things have changed since when I was here. So the intent behind this is it's really with escaping what I'm looking for, like pre-approved supplies list, if that's what you want to call it. We went out to market. We wrote this contract in various separate proportions to give any local suppliers the opportunity either to either to just supply products or to supply construction. We went to all and sundry. With 7 for each council. The feedback was going to tender. I want to give the local suppliers an opportunity. So I won't receive any the third one went to construction only. So I guess what I would say is that this is here. I don't know if this is the tender evaluation report. I don't know if it's circulated with.
No, only to our meeting you facilitate, not to this council.
All right. So there's a tender evaluation report which is pretty detailed. It explains, like with a lot of these tenderers, the big issue is basically getting them so that we can compare apples with apples. So there's a lot of to-ing and fro backwards and forwards saying, well, you haven't put a rate in for this. What is your rate for that? And when they don't put in a rate for that, then we say, well, we have to work out what rate to put in so we can actually compare them all together and be fair across the board to everybody. And we do one of these for every project that we go through. And basically we then, and we have to be careful as well because we try and write these documents because under the Local Government Act, we don't specifically state that this council, and this council are involved in this. Should another council wish to join, they can't. That's just the rules.
Which is why all 7.
Which is why we write all 7 and we say at the moment these councils are participating, however these other councils reserve the right to participate. So are councils bound to use this document? No, they're not bound to use the document, but it's, as I said, it's joint procurement and resource sharing. That's what it's about, and trying to get a better price for the Central West Council. So in this case, and that's one of the reasons you can see we call people contractor C and contractor B. That's actually how they're named in this document, and then in Appendix B, I think, Appendix C, where we actually list who contractor A, B, C, D, and E actually are. And then it depends, when we also send this document back to tenderers and we ask them if they want rates included or without rates. If they want rates included and they're happy to share their rates, we ask that question. We then send them the document with the rates included, but only for those ones that said yes, they want to have the rates shared. If they don't want to have their rates shared, then we take all the rates out and it's just simply named contractor A, B, C, D, and E in this case. So it's really up to the contractors, and the feedback we've received is probably the best feedback they've ever got, because it's basically what we provide to council.
Questions? So Jason, at this stage, council, there was a few issues earlier on, discussions around this. At this stage, all this is approving those councils who wish to participate in it, because we act as the banker, we're facilitating that it's okay for this to proceed. We accept them as a pre-qualified supplier, essentially, so that they can be used, but it still is at the discretion of the individual councils whether they choose to act. This is not an exclusive arrangement that excludes the use of others who may express an interest or councils who may wish to use another direction.
No, not at all. It's still up to council's discretion. Under the Local Government Act, a council has to approve the report so it can be used. Usually it's the banker. As these used to go to Barcoo, as I said previously, but as I understand it, under the Local Government Act, it actually has to go to a council to be ratified. It's that simple, that's all.
Because under the Local Government Act, council can procure services that have been through a tender process with another level of government even, but
Yes.
another local government is specifically referenced. So this being approved by us endorses those councils who wish to participate in it without having to individually assess and go through their own tender process.
Correct.
Right, councillors, questions? Anything else to add? Do I have a mover? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Plum. Debate? Councillor Gleeson.
I'm sorry.
You said vote. Debate, but now I'll say vote. Can we put it to the vote? Those in favour? 7-0, thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be excused if that's okay.
You may. Have a
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas to you and your team.
And you and yours.
3, oh no, we're into the fours, sorry. 3, 4, 1. Community Care Services Report.
Take it as read and make any questions.
Can I have somebody move that we receive that? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Gleeson. All in favour? 7-0, taken as read. Questions if required. Questions, please. Or comments? Like a lot of reports, the next one will be more, Brett and I discussed this morning, the 6 months, so the January reports will give us a full indicative half year. Some things obviously are prepaid and others are paid after the fact, but essentially in terms of tracking expenditure anyway, all of the reports that we receive at the next meeting will give us a very good snapshot of our half year. I'm looking at 5 months, it's like 3 months was probably more reflective
A lot
of
of
the
this
5.
funding is 6 months. It throws the figures out a little bit. So 6 months should give us a clear match up.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I did have a couple of queries. Page 69, expenditure direct wages, seems to be a little bit.
69.
Yeah, expenditure direct wages, I would have thought that was something we might have been a little bit closer to knowing. But the year-to-date budget compared to actual. And then on the next page, again, expenditure, coordination and supervision, year-to-date budget compared to year-to-date actual is considerable difference there. I would have thought those would have been figures that we might have been a little bit closer
So
to.
in the NDIS one, that would be matched by that Breville, that indicates an increase on demand, so that the expenditure income to match that. No, in plan administration, no, there's not. Maybe the care plans, but it's down too.
Even the, on page 70, the NDIS, the fee support contribution, it's 675%. Whether that's, well, that's something paid in advance, but those percentage year-to-date variance and projected annual variance are.
So you don't know how many clients you're going to pick up, I guess, at the end when you start with your budget. So yeah, that's the fee I was looking for. So that higher income for support coordination starts to address some of the then higher expenditure.
So, Mr Mayor, if what happened at the start of the year was we realised that there were different fees. So like that social support, provider travel support coordination, in the zero budget. So we were just costing it all to
Care packages.
plan, I'm not sure which one we were costing it to. So then we've created new accounts, so there's actually separated out to reflect what income truly is. So the budget at the start of the year didn't break it down into those five. It would have just gone into care packages. So now, for the next month, we'll revise that budget to reflect.
Yeah, well, that was going to be the next question. If we know of something halfway through, do we do a budget readjustment at any point?
So councillors, the point I'd like to draw your attention to, actually Sharon and I have had a couple of discussions about this now, and I think we need to shine a very big spotlight on it in the next few months, is actually the line below in the indirect costs, the administrative overheads on every page, except page 69. It's killing us. Administrative overheads are causing every project to run at a loss, with the exception of 60s and Better, which is a different story and runs differently. But administration is just out of control in terms of its impact on the break-even status of those programs. So we don't have answers now. They do appear high, but anything that the local government does is high because we operate under a different award structure to private enterprise, courtesy of the former Premier. So the one good thing I like about these reports are they actually now drill down to the detail where we get the information we need to analyse them. They're very good reports, very good. But what they have done is show us that these programs are in no way profitable for council. They're actually costing us net $189,000 a year to deliver. Now that may be an acceptable cost. Council may in the fullness of time determine that that's what we have to do to ensure people who are in need in our communities. However, if there is a way that we can cost shift that, there's just so many services that we deliver that have come at a negative impact to our ratepayers when we're doing another level of government's job for them, and I don't like it. So obviously there's all of the benefits that I'm sure councillors are aware of. We're maintaining significant employment through our communities by doing this, by not only in the delivery of it, but the administration of them. There's people everywhere that have jobs because we do this. I understand that, and there's people that actually can live here because we do this, because no one else will do it. We've improved, by being an NDIS provider, we've improved the quality of life for dozens of people, not only within our council area, but indeed the whole Central West. Nothing about these programs is bad, but we need to be very cognizant of the cost to provide them. And we are now getting the information that shows us that. I mean, and equal to that is looking at the performance indicators. Attendees is high. Like, difficult to have this financial conversation about programs that are so important to quality of life, population presence, employment opportunities, but we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't analysing that and understanding the why on that. So I've asked we can have a look at those administrative overheads, and indeed there may be areas internally within the programs that sit above the line, but the fact remains at direct profit and loss line, we're profitable in every case but 60s and Better, which once again is a different kettle of fish. But on the net line, we lose in every case, except Home Assist.
Mr Mayor, just one thought to that is the...
Oh no, sorry. Now we're projected to actually lose on Home Assist as well, so it's 100%. Sorry, Councillor Peppers.
No, you're right. There's other organisations that are in this field also, must have.
Yeah, but they don't employ through local government. Like, the big thing is they don't have to employ to our wage structure. We're fixed to that as a local government provider. For example, the administration award wage that's set, private enterprise would go broke if they had to pay that.
Okay. So that's one area where it's different. I was just wondering how they make it profitable compared to us doing the same line of work.
Their wages would be less than they are.
Yeah. And don't forget, some of them are registered as charitable within, so they've got different, they can receive donations without naming them. Some of them aren't private either. They're, here's one. And look here. Named them because I realised by pointing that you know they're going to show them anyway. So yeah, and I mean it's not secret. Like there's nothing local government does that doesn't cost more than if somebody else does it. Absolutely nothing in the world. Building a road to providing NDIS. The reality is if we don't do both of those two things, no one else is going to do it.
It's a bit like Brett said yesterday, you know, as the last resort, we fill the gaps where we've got it, and this one's a bit like mental health, isn't it? It's something we've got to make sure that we play a part in, I think.
So what I'm considering here, we can't know until we get more detail, which seems ridiculous because we've got that much detail in front of us, but just to really narrow that administrative overhead down, I'd probably need to have a conversation with state and federal government and explain to them, you know, providing the banking and postal services, they're kind of a bit dismissive about the fact that we do that because their approach is we'll just do it some other way, get someone else to do it, close Jericho's post office. It can come from somewhere else. Like that's Australian Post's position, hence the four federal governments. The different kettle of fish when we talk about aged care and disability services. It becomes a different thing when we say it's costing us $200,000 loss every year to deliver those programs for you. And they're effectively, with one or two exceptions, they're effectively federal programs. That's a conversation we need to have with the federal government. But I need to know precisely why it's costing us that, rather than just say, oh, well, our admin's costing us this, so that we aren't just backloading other areas of our administration into these programs. Yeah. I'm not suggesting we are, but I think a little bit more teasing out of that will be required before we go to the feds and say, look, you want us to do this, you're going to find some way to discretionary grant us that, may not come within the program. It might be a factor that goes into FAG's considerations in the future for those local governments who have to provide these services as a method of last resort. There may be it may be a genuine cost recovery. You know, if they're prepared to accept our figures at the end of the year, they may look at it and say, well, here's it cost you 120,000, here's 120,000. I very much doubt that. But when you talk about cash positions, if we aren't looking to address areas of our business units that are losing money, then we're not doing the best thing we can do to protect that movement.
That's why I was there with that corporate plan structure. And I wanted all the service, all our business units together, so they're the things that we should be making money on. And then one group, when you look at that group of water, sewage, waste, yes, services, 24 hours, we're at least covering our costs, those items. None of them should be making.
Any other comments about community care services report? Greg, have you got anything to add now? We've gone to that detail.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in that space, where are we at, or what's council doing with previous recruitment of occupational therapists?
Mr. Mayor, we had a interview planned for today, was it? This afternoon, and the applicant pulled out yesterday. Got another offer. So go back to the market again.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
But they're scarce OTs from everyone we've spoken to. They're going to be the hardest position to fill.
I'm going to talk to QUT about it. And then we rotate them through. have them for 6-week blocks to catch up on. You lose them for 6 weeks, or they've got to be qualified, of course. The current arrangement is that they're coming for the last 6 weeks pre-qualification in most cases, but there might be something post-grad that we can explore there. That's right. Obviously, I'm not trying to back away. You're coming, I don't want to not employ somebody, but in the absence of permanent employment, we need to fill this gap because it's not happening. So if it's an interim option,
You get someone here in an interim option from QUT, they might like it too.
part of the side benefit of that internship program is.
Mr. Mayor, is it appropriate time for me to ask the question, is the auditor's report going to resolve some of the problems that has been raised in the last little while?
What problems? Problems I'm talking about, financial money?
No, not financial.
Mr. Mayor, yes. So we've had a verbal, Greg and I have had a verbal update from the auditors. Certainly identified what the problems are. We follow their recommendations
Thank you.
that will resolve a lot of the issues.
So the good thing with if they come through from the verbal into written, the auditors not only raise the issues, but he's a recommended path and a migration plan or things like that. So it's actually goes beyond just flagging the issue, it's actually how you can fix it.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any more? Planning and Development Report, can I have somebody move we receive that, please? Councillor Plum, second. Councillor Gleeson, sorry. All in favour? Carried. Questions? Comments? Anyone who's taken as read? Coming further? 343, please, group by Health and Safety Report. Councillor Pickles. As well. Roger. All in favour? 11-0. Once again, we commend for the detail in this report. Reporting does actually heighten awareness. We're probably seeing things that were probably underreported a period of time ago. The culture around making sure that things are on file.
One thing we have identified is an increase in number of in the last month, which I know Rick and the senior work supervisors have given pillbox talks about the need to be aware of at this time of the year, people's attitude to safety sort of can deteriorate. So just a reminder to keep focus on safety. Is coming up to us.
Very good. 344, just we'll hold. Councillor Rogers, I think, is and Pickles are leaving. One's going out the back, you're going out the side. Can somebody move to receive that report? Gleeson, second, and Hanson. Questions? I can just point a few things out. Just a couple of colour coding things. That you look at the drop down Alpha Community Care. We approved an amended budget, which I just can't recall, but it's taken it so that variance of negative 72,000 is actually not. That's a negative variance to the original budget, not the approved budget for the project. When we amended we amended both the budget and the scope there. So I think you'll find that's almost delivered on budget. Is that complete, finished now? Are we expecting more bills?
No, there shouldn't be, Mr Mayor. I'd have to check with GBA. Chris.
I just, by the fact that it's coloured out, I'm assuming it's pretty close to finished.
Yep.
Plant we've discussed in previous meetings, there's nothing new there. There's an issue with pathways down. If you look at Shakespeare Street Alpha, there's an approved budget there of 220, only 72 to date, although that probably isn't quite accurate, but there's 2 years worth of funding there. Brett, can you go into more detail?
So, Mr Mayor, we've actually got 2 grants for Alpha footpaths or pathways. I just need to check. So we've only, the 220 is one budgeted item. So what happened was we got 140 the first one. So 140,000 the first lot of footpaths. When we did it, was when we completed the project, we hadn't spent all 140. They said, well, continue on so you can spend it all. So we've done another section. I believe that's 72,000 would be the continuation of the old project, not the start of the $220,000 project.
It's still,
So it should be matched against last year's funding, not against the new funding.
what we might look to do next year is when the budget cost could have included in it carried over funds.
What we
For
normally
this
do,
report.
when the budget's prepared early June, we assume that certain projects will be finished.
Oh yeah, sorry, I just mean this for the preparation of this report, if we just combine the two, because it's still, if we don't, or if you just take our budget 21 out of it and just go budget cost, because it was budgeted last year, so you combine however many years worth of funding into the one column.
And because our finance officer has only been on board for
a few months,
6 weeks, he doesn't understand the intricacies of what that funding is.
There's probably a colour coding issue there though, because that should be actually coming up as green, not red, because we're actually under the budget.
Under the budget, we're under the 220.
You know what I mean? So it's probably just a.
To you, Mr Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Sorry, yeah.
There's actually 2 job numbers.
Yes, that's that's what I'm saying. There's actually 2 jobs and I need to.
Right, I'm with you.
So it may have gone over.
Current one. Yeah. So the current budget is 65,000 for this year, and that's where the 72,000 has been spent.
Right.
But the other one has got an expenditure of probably $99,700.
Against how big a budget?
I'll go back to last year's budget. Is it 140?
Some
Which
of
goes to your budget, Dan?
It was 140,000 as the budget for the first stage of the footpaths, then the second stage is 220,000. So it's 360,000 altogether for footpaths and Alpha.
Right. Anyway, questions on the report? No question?
Is that similar with down in sport and rec, in Goal 5 community sport and rec? The figures there don't add up.
The rec park one?
Yeah, same thing, it's got the budget of 400,000, 341 spent, but we're red 59,000.
I'm guessing that's exactly the same.
Similar, the same.
There must be 2 job codes, one from last year and.
Oh, plus those two, through you, Mr Mayor, those 2 particular items, the figure in there isn't a negative, whereas the other reds
Have to
are
have
a negative dollar
yeah.
figure. So it's.
So this must pick up information, Jenny, from within the finance system and link directly in, does it? So it.
Depends, if the job's got items, then this is picking up the parent account. So, 400,000 is the new money for this year. I'll have to have a look like the 340, whether that's some of last year's program, well, it would be some carried over from last year. And how much is against the 400,000? Which I can. Which I'll give you a full report next month. Have time to sit down with the finance officer. Go through it in more detail.
The only other thing, through you, Mr. Mayor, the very bottom, we've got a summary for the budget, operating budget, but not actual cost today. That might just be a handy indicator if we're 6 months through and we've only spent 30% of the budget or 70% of the budget.
Yep.
Might not be a good indicator either at times.
Sorry, we haven't got a what, sorry?
Down the very bottom, a total, like we've got a total for the operating budget, that not actual costs,
Oh,
the
sorry.
very last line.
In the special operating
Yeah.
costs, did we do have one in the other one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
Because on this big one, we're a long way off. We've got a $25 million budget and we've spent 4.6.
Yeah.
Or is it? No, sorry.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think realising that a lot of
Yes.
it's like damage.
Correct, yeah.
and it might be in train, but not going to happen until early in the year. It could be big ticket procurement.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. Council, sorry, Councillor Arthur?
No.
Please, all good. Okay. Then the councillors back in, please. Three, 4, 5. I won't move to adoption. Councillors, at the request, I have forwarded to you the policy marked with red. Did that last night after Craig provided it to me. Marked in red with where the changes are. So, does anyone have anything they wish to change here, wish to debate? Or I move to resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Through the document, as Greg and I had a quick discussion about this yesterday, it's got questions decided by majority, so it's all gone from resolution to question. That's how it is now, Greg? Yeah. Repeal of amendment was the other one I asked about yesterday. And I see later in the document where I was reading this that it does say that you need to have 3 months. So we're contradicting ourselves there a bit in 262. A resolution of council may repeal or amended.
Just hang on this word, because there's different sections relate to different things, so you're going to have to draw our attention to where you're talking.
Right, well, I'm looking at
Page what?
page 2, 262.
Section 262.
Yep. So that's not our policy, that's the Queensland Government.
That's the legislation, that's the regulation.
That's the Local Government Act or regulation, so that's not a negotiable.
Right. So then when you go, this is where it's going to get difficult for me.
5 days, right?
Sorry, Brett?
Yeah, at least 5 days before the meeting.
Yeah, but then also later in the document, it says something about 3 months from the original motion to
That's if a resolution is defeated.
only defeated.
So if you're looking at page 12 of 23, repealing or amending resolution. Clause 1, a resolution of the council must not be repealed or amended unless noted motion is given in accordance with the requirements of the Act, which is Regulation 262 that you just drew to our attention.
Yep.
Page 2. Item 2, where a motion a relevant motion to repeal or amend a resolution is defeated, a motion to the same or like effect must not be moved until 3 months after the date on which the relevant motion was defeated. So that's if you can bring at any point you can bring the repeal or amend resolution, but if that resolution is defeated, you've got to wait 3 months till you do it again. You can resolve to appeal again, but you've got to wait 3 months. But if we move a resolution today and then you want to come to the next meeting and amend it or repeal it, you can do that. But if that motion is defeated, you wait 3 months. Come back.
That's only defeated
Which is to just preserve a little bit of order. Otherwise, you could have the same two councillors moving and amending just to disrupt the procedure.
Well, when I read the first one, I thought that was the case that might happen, just with 5 days. Yep, okay.
So if you then read that in conjunction with point 3 below it, a relevant motion to appeal or amend, it may be deferred, but likewise it can't wait more than 3 months. So they're consistent with the 3-month approach. So let's just say we move today to do X, Y, Z, and councillors come to the January meeting and want to do A, B, C. The majority can say, I might defer that actually, but they could only defer it out till the April meeting.
Number 4 is the positive side is can amend the previous resolution. Once again, 3 months.
So that tidies up. So, for example, if we move a resolution by our XYZ fleet only, and then we resolve more than 3 months later to acquire something that is not part of XYZ fleet, that supersedes the previous resolution and nullifies it. So that resolutions from councils 7, 8, 9 years ago don't bind us. If we resolve to do something different, that deletes the old motion. Otherwise, which we are about to do, a register of resolutions, but otherwise I'd be sitting here every meeting just hang on. It's somewhere back in 2008, somebody decided to do something different so that we can then delete that resolution and do the new one. So this allows whatever decision you make today as a council to amend or repeal a pre-existing resolution from any period of time more than 3 months ago. If it's not consistent with the decision today, it allows you to change the direction of council without having to go through procedural motions to consistently repeal, and then deliver new ones. Okay. Sorry, now you said another question, council people.
If anyone else has got something, can they please raise it? I'm going to find what else I've got here.
Well, councillor Peoples, the time being 10 a.m, I'll adjourn and allow, whilst we have smoko, you to find your problems. Okay.